Now it's a great pleasure to welcome our presenter, Dena Alt. Dena comes to us today from Vancouver, Washington. She has been a Toastmaster for several years, first between the years 2010 and 2014, and then returning in early 2021. Dena is a counselor, consultant, and parent coach. After spending the past couple of years in various levels of social isolation and limited social interaction, while outside of a computer screen, Dena has noticed the same technology that helped us to stay connected during the past couple of years has brought about a shift in our personal interactions to that of considerably more meaningless small talk. What do we say when we are not responding to a post or clicking the like button? Through Dena's work as a parent coach, she realized the skills she teaches parents to better connect with their children are skills anyone can use to connect with those around them. Dena is here to share with you 5 focus points to help you make more meaningful connections. Please join me and welcome Dena Alt, the 5-minute connection.
All right. Thank you so much for a lovely introduction. And thank you so much for showing up, you guys. It's beautiful, at least up here in Vancouver. So I'm happy that you decided to still join us today and not be outside. Again, my name is Dena Alt, and I have been in Toastmasters for a while, and I am so grateful to Toastmasters and the things that I have learned here, as well as the confidence I have gained to be able to speak in public. I do lots of different kinds of speaking, not only in Toastmasters, but as a consultant to different communities. I've done all kinds of different things. So as Renee had mentioned, I'm a counselor, educator, speaker, parent coach. I've been doing this work for 30 years, guys. I don't even like to admit it's been that long, but it has been a long time I've been doing this work. And boy, have things shifted over the years. But even though I do all of these things, I want to share with you that I'm a proud parent of 2 neurodivergent teenagers. That's autistic, sensory sensitive, social anxiety, and they have been as much or a bigger teacher to me than any of those degrees that I've earned. So I just wanted to shout out to them a little bit because they teach me so much every single day about being human. All right, one of the things that we know about us as human beings is that we're social beings. We want to connect with other people. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. We want to be accepted and acknowledged. We want to be part of a group. Well, like Renee mentioned in my introduction, boy, did we go through some trials and tribulations when it comes to social interaction recently. And I think they say we're out of the pandemic now, although we're still seeing a lot of the after effects of being socially isolated. Socially isolated, not for the 3 to 6 weeks that they first thought, but for a couple of years. And that has really caused a lot of damage in our communities, and not just the United States. Worldwide, we are in a mental health crisis. The social isolation that we experienced has made impacts on all of us at varying levels. Our children weren't around other kids to play with. They didn't have the interaction that they had at the schools with their friends, the neighborhood kids, because everybody was kind of afraid of this virus that was floating around, taking so many members of our community. Thank goodness that we have the technology that we have. Can you imagine had we not had video conferencing, telephones like they had in the early 1900s, the last pandemic, how that would have definitely made a different impact on us. But luckily we didn't. We had technology, and that has helped us. At least more than it could have if we didn't have it. But I really noticed something, and even before the pandemic, I was noticing this, but when that hit, and as we were climbing out, I noticed even bigger deficits in our ability to interact with each other. Because now we've had a year, 2 years, some people 3 years, only in technology, commenting on Facebook or in other kinds of social media, only communicating through a screen, on a chat feature on the side, maybe saying something on video if you were okay with turning on your cameras and speaking. It's caused a lot of problems, I think, in how we interact together. I know for myself, the first time I went into a store after weeks of not being anywhere, it felt really weird. You guys remember feeling that? How awkward it might have felt if you hadn't. Now, with the job that I had, all my work went home and on camera. So I didn't even have, the interactions that maybe a grocery store clerk had, that were, because those stores still stayed open. There were a lot of us that went home and went on camera, and how difficult that was a little bit to get back out into the world because we're social beings. We were out of practice. Now, in 2010, so before the pandemic, I was working at an agency before I went into private practice as a counselor and parent coach. And they said to me, Dena, there's this really cool program we want you to learn. And it's about helping parents of children with challenging behaviors. I mean, like big challenging behaviors. These are kids that were abused and neglected. These are kids that had other types of disabilities, maybe autistic, ADHD, maybe other kinds of trauma that is manifesting itself in these really big behaviors, and parents didn't know what to do. They said, we want to train you in this modality. You are a teacher, you've done that for years, and you're a counselor. We want you to learn this. So I went to the training, and this is going to make sense here in a second. And it was pretty intensive, but what we were learning about, and then what I then started doing for families, is this program called Parent-Child Interaction Therapy. And in that program, there's two phases. Phase one is teaching parents a system and language on how to connect differently with their children. Now, remember, this could be bio children, this could be grandchildren, nieces, nephews, or foster children. How we connect with them in a different way, that changes behavior. And what was really cool about that phase is I saw some beautiful things happening in front of me. And not just in my work, because I used this at home with my littles. And I saw how it changed our interactions to being far more meaningful. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is so interesting. We're teaching this to parents of littles, but the elements of this can benefit all of us. So I started really thinking about how I was using that with the parents I was working with, how I was beginning to use that subconsciously, without even thinking about it, to my family members, to my colleagues, to other people I was meeting here and there, standing in line, whatever. And it was noticing how those interactions just seemed more meaningful. So I created and wrote up the 5-minute connection. Because one of the things that they teach in PCIT is it only takes 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day practicing this stuff with your kid, and it'll change behavior. And I couldn't believe it but I saw it, and I've seen it hundreds of times. It literally changes and transforms their relationship and their lives. So cool. Wouldn't we all want a little some of that? All right. And I'm meaning more than just the small talk, right? A lot of us do the small talk. Oh, how are you doing today? Sometimes we don't even wait for them to answer. It's just automatic, throwing it out there. How you doing? Isn't the weather beautiful? Yeah, we just said that a minute ago. Maybe it's something that you see in line. It's small talk. The actual definition of small talk is polite and standard conversation about unimportant things. And I remember thinking, I hate small talk myself. And there are a lot of people that don't like it. And I work a lot with autistic people and autistic youth, and they hate it too. They're like, it's such a waste of time. Why are we talking about things that don't mean anything? The idea around the 5-minute connection is that we don't just do small talk, because small talk really keeps us disconnected. It feels really fake. Sometimes it's just feeling awkward silence, and it doesn't create meaningful interactions. So why do we do it? Sometimes I think it's just feeling awkward silence, or I'm not even sure what to say to this person. So I'll just, hey, how's the weather? What's going on? And we're all awkward. So the 5-minute connection is a way for us to take a few minutes to connect with people in a little bit different way that's more meaningful. But there are a few rules, like everything. But the 5-minute connection can be applied to all kinds of relationships. Your parent and child. Maybe you're the adult child of a parent. Peer-to-peer, teacher to student, or even student to teacher, employer to employee, or employee to employer, mentor to mentee, neighbor to neighbor, or stranger to stranger. If we think about these 5 focus points and we utilize these ideas, we can make those small moments a little more meaningful. And heck, you might actually make a new friend if you're not just talking about the weather. Well, let's get started. The very first focus points, and I am going to have 5 different focus points. The very first one is to be present. So put your phones down. Don't answer it if it bings or the music plays because you got an email, you got a text message, maybe Messenger. Ooh, someone liked my post on Facebook. Because in all reality, it's only 5 minutes or less. This doesn't have to be a really long interaction for it to be meaningful. But you got to be present for it to mean anything. If you're thinking more about, ooh, what was that bing? Who just texted me? And that's where your mind is, then the interaction is not going to be meaningful because you aren't present. So put your to-do list that's in your head away for a minute. Turn your phones off, turn them on silent, stick it in a bag, leave it in the car, whatever it is, wherever you're wanting to make this connection with whoever. Oh, sorry, guys, I'm distracted. A bee just flew in and oh my goodness. So be sure to be present. So that's something we have to be mindful about. Am I actually present before I have this interaction? Because if you are, it's going to be more meaningful. Number 2, check your bias. We all have it. Every single one of us has bias. Most of us have a lot of bias we don't even know is there. So before you have an interaction with somebody, make sure, am I going to be judgment-free? Am I bringing in ideas to this interaction based on their skin color, their gender orientation, the name brand on their tennis shoes, what kind of food's in their grocery cart, the kind of clothes that they're wearing, what I think they might be believing or what their values might be based on what I'm seeing? Because the most meaningful interactions are the ones where a person feels like I am just being judged as or not being judged. I am being seen as a person, a human being that's just here on this planet the same as you guys are, living my life. I have family, I have careers. So it doesn't really matter if our values match. Are you coming into that with bias, or are you thinking of them as just another human being that I can connect with? Check your bias, because like I said, it's there, even if you wish it wasn't there. And that's internal work that we have to do. But put that in your forefront before you make that interaction. Number 3, carefully observe. What I mean by observe is not just looking at the other person, but also looking at yourself. What is your body language going to say to the person you're about to interact with? Are you closed off? Are you scowling? Are you feeling terrible that day? Look at them. How do you think they might be feeling? What about timing? If it looks like they're late, it probably is not going to have a good interaction because they're running late. They're feeling anxious about something. Maybe they're busy in a project. Like you're at work and you see someone really busy in the computer, that might not be the right time. So you want to really kind of observe the environment and the people or the person that you're going to interact with. Make sure this is good timing. Is this a good space to actually step in and create an interaction? But like I said, it's not just about them. It's what are you projecting? What is it? How do I look that might change the interaction? Okay. Carefully observe. So now we have be present, check your bias, and carefully observe. See, all that is happening before you actually say a word to anybody. There are important things to think about before the interaction. You know, while I was kind of creating this, I went online and I just did a Google search, said small talk. Man, there are a lot of pages after pages about really great questions for small talk, questions to engage in small talk. Now, those are really great, but no one's preparing anybody for the environment in which we have this conversation. And that's what these first three are and why they're so important. Okay, but the next one is also important. Be engaging. And again, that's what our body is doing. That's part of that observation. Am I open? But the other part of being engaging is looking around, like, do they have something that you can comment about that maybe have something in common? This is where I like to do what I call praise with purpose. Looking at something that's going on. If it's my neighbor, I might want to comment on the beautiful lilacs. She has this amazing, huge lilac tree. I'm so jealous of it. It's beautiful. That might be a topic of conversation. It's not small talk. I'm actually interested in that. Maybe it's a topic that you just talked about at work in a staff meeting. You thought it was really interesting, and somebody had said something that piqued your interest. That might be a nice, engaging thing to bring up as that initial conversation piece. It's not just small talk. Small talk really is about the weather, things that are not very important. Sure, it's beautiful. We can all see that. It's kind of a no-brainer. Yes, it's hot outside. Hi, how are you? Don't only ask it if you really, really want to know. Most of them go, I'm fine, thanks. Because we don't know if anybody really wants to know, right? So part of that engaging is coming up with some of those questions or comments or praise that you can say to that other person. Because the idea of this 5-minute connection is for you to listen, to connect, not step in and tell them all about you. We all want to talk about ourselves, but you as the initiator want to create a meaningful connection, you got to be engaging with them. This is something I taught a lot to other mental health providers when they're thinking, how do I engage with my clients? They aren't even be talking about anything. Engage with them. Let them be your interest for a moment. This next one is a biggie. Actively listen. Now, I know I've heard this a few times. I saw some stuff in Toastmasters, through the pathways, they talk about active listening. And so we hear about it, but active listening is bigger than that. It's remembering to be active. The number one thing that I see in people who don't communicate well with each other is that they listen, and while they're listening, they're preparing their response or they're coming up with their questions, which means they're missing a bunch because they're not listening to understand. They're listening to create a response, which means they miss a lot. And for a meaningful connection, the person that's talking wants to know that they're being heard. So be sure that you're actually listening on purpose or listening to understand, not creating your responses or creating your questions while they're talking. Be sure that you have some engaging questions that has to do with what they were talking about. Clarifying questions. If you go off the cuff and do something completely unrelated, you might lose that interaction. Now, can that come later? Sure, because that might be a segue. But for that initial 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes really, but 5 minutes, listen to what they're saying. Ask questions about what they're doing. Paraphrasing and summarizing. This, I teach so many people about this as a way to make sure that the speaker, because here's what happens. We have a thought in our head. We know exactly, have you ever had this happen? I know exactly what I want to say. It comes out my mouth and either it doesn't come out the way I thought it did, or it didn't kind of land the way I was hoping, or I thought the other person understood because they did this. Yeah. And minutes later, hours later, days later, you realize they totally didn't get what I was saying. Because even though showing interest by nodding and it doesn't ensure that you understood. And then one of the ways that we help the speaker know that we understood what they were saying is we paraphrase or summarize a little bit back. That doesn't mean everything they say I said back. It means bits and pieces. What I hear you saying is, or, oh, what I think you meant was, to make sure. Because if you're wrong, they can tell you. And if you're right, then they know man, they were really listening to me. Time and time again, I have families that come to me, and when they're talking, and I'm doing this, all this stuff, right? All these 5 things, and I'm paraphrasing some stuff back. They're like, wow, that was really, I really felt heard. You can do this too. That isn't this special skill. I have these degrees, therefore that's why I'm better at it. No, I was doing this. Now, it's a skill, which means we have to practice. It doesn't always land right. So give yourself grace and know that it's not always going to land right. But the more you practice, the better you're going to get. For little kids, we're going to just copy them and they'll be fine with it. They'll love it. But we're not going to do that to teenagers or adults, right? So if they go on and tell you, I tell the neighbor, oh, I just love your lilac bush. It's so beautiful. How do you keep it in such great shape? There's my engaging question. And she goes on to tell me that how she fertilizes, how she prunes, what she does, blah, 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 whatever it is. Then I'm paraphrasing. Oh, you use what kind of fertilizer? Oh, you prune in the fall. I don't know how to prune lilac. I wish I did because mine don't look so hot. But I will ask clarifying questions. I'll summarize and paraphrase bits and pieces. And when you do that to somebody and they know you've heard, they want to keep talking. That's how you can get more time with them. That's how you can get more information. And that's how you create those really positive, meaningful connections by actively listening. So do you see how we had a lot of prep work coming up, right? We have to do a lot of different things to get us ready for that moment where we actually start talking. So we want to remember to be present, right? Put your phones down. Get the to-do list out of your head. If it's there and you can't focus, then it's probably not the right time for that interaction. Make sure that you can be present, whatever that means for you, so that you can focus on that person, so they can feel that you are focused on them. One of the things my kids say, because I say I've been doing this kind of stuff for years, even with my kids, is my daughter said to me, you know what I love about special time? That's what we called it. We had it every single day, 5 minutes a day. Sometimes I went later, but no matter what, they got 5 minutes. She said, I learned from you is that no matter what was going on in the world, Mom, the world stopped for me for 5 minutes. And that always made me feel so good. I have parents that say that to me. I have other kinds of clients, because I do other kinds of work, that all say, I feel heard by you, and I can tell you're with me, and that I'm important for that moment of how well you listen to me, because I'm present. I also step in and make sure that I don't have any bias that's going to get in the way, that I am treating them just like a human being that they are, not worrying about what's their race, do they have my values, what church do they go to, what clothes are they wearing, how much money do they make, a slew of other things that can get in the way. We check our bias first, make sure that we're judgment-free for that interaction. They will feel it, and your interaction will feel different if you do this. You're going to carefully observe what's my body language telling them and what's their body language telling me. Is this the right timing? To be engaging, I need to think about something that might be in common. I'm going to be looking around. What do I have that's in common with them that's not the typical small talk? Some of my favorite conversation starters are the great t-shirts that have sayings, and I think that is the best ever. And that might be an engaging piece that's not just small talk. And of course, actively listening, being active in that process, listening to understand, not listening to respond. Again, watching the body language, paraphrasing and summarizing, being really careful and purposeful in your community, your connections. Now, I say that because some of us are thinking, but I'm at the store, I'm busy, and I'm in the line. You're in the line for 10 minutes. Lines long, you've been in those lines. And the person in front of you thought, well, we're just standing here. And instead we engage just in the small talk. Oh yeah, you got this, or, try this, try something. You see something specific. Oh, I didn't see they had strawberries. I'm wondering what you're going to make with those strawberries. That's more meaningful than, oh, it's pretty nice weather out there. I hope you're getting out and enjoying yourself. Because that person might actually share with you the secret recipe of her family that uses that ingredient and have this meaningful connection. They will leave that day and remember that connection that you have had with them in the grocery store. I've actually had people that I've seen elsewhere. I'm like, man, they look familiar. And I realized, oh, I talked to them in line. I only remembered them because we actually had a connection in some line somewhere. Because I listened, I was engaging, I was observant, I made sure that my bias was out the window. I was treating them just like a human being, and I was fully present in the moment. I hope you guys enjoyed the 5-minute connection, and I challenge you to try it. Try the connection. Think about it, right? Lots of preparation before you actually start saying words, and really being thoughtful about how you're connecting with other people. Now, it wouldn't be a good presentation about connecting if we don't discuss or have questions. So guys, anybody have any questions at this point, or anything we could talk about in making the 5-minute connection? And just start talking. Go ahead, Brent. Looks like you got your hand up.
How did you come up with this subject? Why did you decide I'm going to speak on connection?
Well,
You must have put a lot of thought to this.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like what I said at the beginning. It started with, I had learned this program where I was teaching parents how to connect with their kids. Now, in that program, what they teach is that take 5 minutes a day, and they do it with toys because we're talking littles, ages 2 to 7, okay? And while you're playing, we're going to do a few different kinds of things. We're going to praise, we're going to reflect, which is active listening. We're going to describe, we're going to do these different things. And when you say these things during that 5 minutes, it helps your child feel like you're listening. It makes them feel heard, seen, makes them feel connected. And what we saw, and I experienced with my own kids, that even though I had a good relationship, it made it even stronger because they felt seen and heard all the time. So that was the first start, right? So I had this, I'm like, this is so cool. And when I first heard it, literally, I was like, yeah, really? You're telling me that's going to change behavior? But then I watched it happen and I thought, wow, this is cool. And I've been doing that now for 13 years. Okay. So, but then over time, like, okay, I'm doing this now with parents and seeing how they're engaging with me even more by tweaking it, right? I'm not going to treat them like they're 5, but doing that same kind of thing and just tweaking pieces, that they engaged with me more. And when they engaged with me more, they bought into what I was teaching, which meant that they did that more with their kids. So then we saw even more progress. And I trained this program too. So I was even seeing with my trainees, when they weren't doing this with the parents, they were just teaching the parents the skills and trying to teach, they weren't engaging with the parents and they weren't seeing near the progress. And they're like, Dena, how do you get these kids to have this change so fast? I'm like, because I am doing to the parents so I'm modeling for the parents what I want them to do for the kids. So it's this big circle. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Well, why can't that work with my colleagues? So I started changing how I was training and started doing this stuff with my trainees. And they started becoming better therapists. And then I do it with my colleagues. So I was just kind of on the way. And I thought, this is just so cool. And with the kids, we're only doing it 5 minutes a day. And it's such huge progress, like huge. Some kids go from hitting, kicking, screaming, spitting to being cooperative and happy and joyful just from that. Right? Really? So amazing. Our language is so powerful, and how what we say out affects how what we feel in, and affects the other person. Like if we can do that with our children, and I can do that with the parents, and I can do that with my trainee, then everybody can do this with anybody. And so I used it as a speech. So my first 5-minute connection was just a speech that I did in my home group last fall. And it just felt so good. I was like, yes, because this is what I do all the time. Like I said, I meet people in the grocery store. My kid drives them nuts. Mom, you talk to everybody. But I'm doing this stuff and they're connecting and they remember me. I remember you. I saw you at Winco and we had a conversation. So they remembered it, which meant it was meaningful. And I was doing those things. So when I saw this is working, this can work for anybody. I need to do more. Yeah, Josie.
It has actually helped me with my anxiety. Reassociating how, because I hate small talk. It's like, just go away. I don't have time. But it really helped me work through my anxiety. And I use it with my granddaughter all the time who has issues.
So yeah, thanks, Josie. I'm glad you spoke up because yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, huh? And like I said, the first time I heard this, I was like, well, I'm going to give it a shot because my kid is autistic and has sensory processing challenges. And as a little one, I didn't know yet, her behavior was really hard. It was really hard. And so when my agency said, I want to have you trained in this, I thought, wow, nice double dip. I can use it at home and I can use it to help other families, right? And so I sat through this training. And I literally thought, you guys are nuts. Seriously, this is all you want me to do is say a few things, you know, the blah, blah, blah for 5 minutes over Legos. It changed my life. My kid now is 16, that I was afraid at one point, like, oh my God, what's our future going to be? I didn't know because she was all over kicked out of daycares, all kinds of stuff, right? She's so fabulous. And it helped her feel confident about herself. I got to learn things from her and about her through this process that I wouldn't have learned if I was just disciplining her all the time. These kinds of things I bring into my work because I'm a parent coach and I work mostly, I do the BCIT program with a lot of families, but I also do speaking and coaching to parents of autistic youth. And this is a piece of it. In fact, 2 hours ago, I did this with a client. This training was just one of my sessions. Let's talk about, because he wants to know how to get better. He's autistic and be better with social interaction. He wants to meet friends. He wants to, and I still tweaked it a little bit differently, even more for him because he's 15 and I want to make sure that the kids don't think he's weird by doing some of this stuff. But, you know, I had to give him lots of nice concrete examples. And the mom was like, that was so cool because I had her sit in with us. But it is powerful. It's really powerful. And after we sat behind screens for a long time, it felt weird. I remember it felt weird for me, and I already had this tool, right? I think, wow, look at all the people that may not have this tool that has now been isolated. How are they going to re-engage? And I'm seeing that around, and it's awkward still. There's still moments of awkwardness around in our community.